This is the Anti-Social Podcast, episode 179, with Ralph Sutton of the SDR show and GaS Digital Network. But before we kick into the episode, if we haven't met before, yes, this is the introduction. My name is Andy Dowling, and in addition to hosting this podcast, I'm also the bass player for the Australian metal band Lord. And if you love a bit of old school heavy metal, you can go to lord.net.au, or you can go to lord.net.au/united, where our first single, track 1 from our upcoming album, Fallen Idols, and the song's called United, Welcome Back. You can go over there and check that out over at lord.net.au/united. The video clip's there, the track listing for the Australian edition of the album is there, some information about the release. No release date just yet. Stay tuned. I'm going to have a great podcast about this one day, but it is coming in 2019, so just hang on to your hats. But in the meantime, go over and check out the new single. It's on Spotify, it's on Apple Music, it's on YouTube, it's on Facebook as well. Share it around, tag some mates, do a bit of social media love. A bit of people power will go a long way, and it'll mean a hell of a lot to me. And I usually leave this to the end of the episode itself, but a quick couple of call to actions. If you leave a review anywhere on the internet, it doesn't have to be good. It can be good, bad, indifferent, whatever. I just want people talking about the band. If you want to leave a review anywhere on the internet about any of our releases over the years, do so. Send me a screenshot, and I'm going to send you our little gift pack in the mail just to help us out, because we need people talking about the band leading up to the release of the new album. In addition to that, if you're going to any metal show or rock show or whatever over the coming month or so, please take a photo of yourself at the show wearing your Lord t-shirt. Send it to me, and once again, I'm going to send out a little care pack in the mail as well, just to say thank you. It's all branding, it's all getting the name out in front of people, getting us back into conversation again. It's been a little while since our last studio album, so we're really pumped to be able to sort of really kick off a great campaign once we've got that release date locked in. So in the meantime, the more that people are talking about us, the better. So go over and do that. Shoot me some details, and I will flick you out little thank yous in the mail. Lord.net.au/united. Cheers. Now, I also host a second podcast called the Self-Starter Podcast, which is all about small business, self-employment, and freelancing. So depending on what floats your boat, you could have your own business or wish that you could start one. You might have a really cool way of earning a bit of extra pocket money, a little side hustle, a little weekend gig, or an after-hours gig, whatever it might be, or you're a freelancer, whatever it might be. Self-starter might be for you, or you might know somebody that might really take an interest in self-starter. So go over to selfstarter.com.au. You can search for Self-Starter in your podcast player. Season 2 will kick off in June. I'm still looking for a couple of guests to round off Season 2. So if you've got any suggestions, flick them over, and I'm more than happy to consider them for Season 2. But I've already got some great guests already recorded and lined up for the second season. So really looking forward to sharing it. Season 1 is already out there, and you can find that on all of the usual podcast haunts. But there you go, all the plugs. Shout out time. Every week, I think one legend that supports me and the podcast. It can be a range of different ways. It could be big, amazing things like donating a fuck ton of money to me via the beer shout button over at andysocial.net on the PayPal button there. It could also be, oh guys, I don't know what's going on today. It could be buying some merchandise via the online store over at andysocial.net. It could be something really simple, like a message of encouragement or a guest recommendation or a bit of social media love, that the whole liking, retweeting, tagging, commenting, all that shit. It means a hell of a lot. It's just the tiniest of things help move and create momentum around this podcast, and the podcast's success to date is because of all these little things that you folks do for me. So thank you so much to everybody that does the little 1%ers. They mean a lot. So this week's shout out is for Paul Thornhill from Longreach in Queensland. Paul has given me a beer shout and just flung me a couple of dollars, and just basically just a nice little message to say keep up the great work and cheers from Longreach. And I had no idea anybody from Longreach was listening to this podcast. I think there's a couple of guys from Mount Isa, and I think I've done a shout out for somebody from Mount Isa in the past. But either way, I mean, Mount Isa and Longreach aren't exactly close together, but they're still several hours apart, I think. But either way, Longreach is right up sort of, what would you say? It's not even central Queens. It's like central North Queensland, or is it central northwest? Queensland? Is that even a great description of a location? Probably not. It probably contradicts itself. Anyway, Longreach, go and look it up on a map. Paul is giving me a big shout, a little message of encouragement. Thanks, Paul. And I have not been to Longreach since I was a little kid, so I've got no idea what it's like out there. I don't even know if there's any bands out there. I didn't even know there was podcast listeners out there. I'm sure there are. But just stoked that there's people listening in our regional centres. It means a hell of a lot, and I'd love to be able to reach more people. If anyone's actually got any ideas of how to reach more people in these regional spots, hit me up. I'd love to get creative. I'd love to get out there and have a chat to people and just get some more listeners from these areas. And I've probably got some ideas just in the front of my head now. But yeah, hit me up. I'd love to brainstorm with some people and maybe make a little project out of it. So yeah, if you're feeling creative, hit me up. But anyway, sorry, Paul. Paul, when you hear this message, shoot me a message. When you hear this message, shoot me a message. Oh, guys, when you hear this, shoot me a message, Paul, and I will send you out some stuff in the mail. I've got a bunch of stuff lying around, and it'll just be a little thank you pack. We all love getting something in the mail, so make sure you shoot me a message when you hear this. Thank you, Paul. And thank you to everybody that continues to support this podcast. Now, also, speaking of shout outs, because this is just a big shout out podcast, people have been buying from the andysocial.net/buy stuff page. I have links to the Lord online store, Dominus online store, the Andy Social online store. I've got my eBay and Discog stores there as well. Lots of different ways to support me and get some goodies from it. The eBay and Discog stores in particular are all my personal items. eBay has some of Jess's stuff on there as well, so make sure you go over there and check it all out. There's an eclectic bag of mixed goods in there, so go and have a sticky peek if you're curious. But anybody that goes and buys, especially from eBay and Discogs, and just lets me know via the message when you order that you heard me crap on about this on the podcast, please, include that in your message, and I will include some extra goodies in your order as well, because it's the least that I could do. But a few quick little shout outs. Flick over the page. Here we go. Just continue on this bloody long list. Bree from Adelaide in South Australia, Damien from Ringwood, Victoria, and I'm going to keep this short and sweet this episode. Barbara from Surat in Queensland. I don't think I've ever been to Surat. Maybe. I don't know. Anyway, thanks, folks. Really appreciate the support and buying crap off me, decluttering my house, passing good items onto good people, and getting a little bit of coin for it in exchange always is a plus as well. So thank you so much, folks. It means a lot. And once again, andysocial.net/buy stuff. Go and have a sticky beak. Thanks. Episode 179 of the podcast is with Ralph Sutton. Ralph is the co-owner of GaS Digital Studios. This is one of several episodes that I recorded at GaS Digital in New York. Last week you would have heard my chat with Louis J. Gomez, who's the other co-founder of GaS Digital, and Ralph is the other one. And next week I've got some more guests on that I've recorded at GaS Digital as well, so stay tuned. But Ralph's a radio personality, a podcast personality, a writer. You may remember him from Two of Us, but also the SDR show, which is on the GaS Digital Network. And he's hosted a bunch of events such as the MB Rock Festival, Shiprocked, etc. He's written for Metal Edge, Social Underground. He is a personality in the rock and metal world. And so you may have seen him pop up in a whole range of different things out in the media over the last couple of decades. So I got to sit down and have a chat to Ralph. And Ralph, along with Louis, are the brains behind GaS Digital, but this all started in Ralph's apartment. Now, we get in fairly deep into the whole GaS Digital world and podcasting and things like that. And I'm just, for me personally, doing podcasts for the last several years, walking into the studio, I was just in awe. I was completely amazed at what these guys have been able to create, and to be able to have a professional podcast studio. They had multiple rooms there, and they've got another room at another site. And to be able to do this in one of the most expensive cities in the world is just incredible. And it showed me what the possibilities are. And although Australia's really, really different to the US as far as the popularity of podcasts, it's certainly getting better and it's continuing to build. So for me, it started planting a lot of seeds. I came home very inspired, and I've started putting in some groundwork to do some things myself here in Australia over the coming years. So I was certainly inspired chatting to Ralph. Ralph certainly opened my mind up to a lot of possibilities, and you guys are going to, I think, probably get a little bit inspired listening to this. So I'm not going to crap on too much. I think there's a lot of podcast talk that can be had in the upcoming episodes. You guys are going to see a lot of stuff come from me personally, but definitely check out GaS Digital. I think they are really showing a lot of people what the potential is. And yes, there's a lot of podcast networks out there, especially in the US, but all over the world now. It's becoming more popular. They're being bought by large corporations now. People can see that there's a lot of value in podcasting, but GaS Digital are doing it in a really cool way. And so Ralph will explain this in this chat anyway. Go to gasdigitalnetwork.com. You'll be able to see all the shows that are under their network umbrella. Shows such as the SDR show, which is hosted by Ralph. Also, Legion of Skanks, The Justice Show, I Want to Talk, Irish Goodbye, Believe You Me, The Real Ass Podcast, heaps of stuff. So go over to gasdigitalnetwork.com. Heaps of shows there to go and check out. But you can check out more from Ralph by going to IamRalphSutton.com. You can follow him on Twitter and Instagram by searching I am Ralph Sutton. But as always, I'll have all the links in the show notes over at andysocial.net, and you can click through on your podcast player and all the links will be in there. So enough waffling on from me. Please enjoy this really, really cool chat in New York at GaS Digital Studios with Ralph Sutton. I was talking to Bobby earlier. He said that you guys have only been set up here for a few months.
Since May. So what is that now? Like 8 months.
Yeah.
It was in my house for the first year and a half.
So obviously this is expanded. It's bigger now, but I can't imagine running a podcast network out of someone's home.
When it started, it was very simple. There was going to be 4 shows.
Yep.
One was mine.
Yep.
One had only one person on it. So then there was really 2 other shows, and those 2 shows were once a week also. So 2 of them were on Wednesdays and 2 of them were on Mondays, and that was it. So it wasn't a big deal. It really was kind of easy. And then you fast forward a year and change, and now at the time I think it was 16 or 17 shows. Also, there was just one producer. You know, the same producer was doing all 4 shows. And then it just got really crazy. At one point, I remember the day that I realized I got to fucking stop this was we probably moved in here a year prematurely. You know, probably couldn't afford it the way we should have afforded it. Like it really put a stress on the company because I couldn't take it anymore. I don't mean to be rude, but they're fucking animals. They really are, you know. And I'm the oldest person here, right? And I'm the one that has had more life experience, I guess. So I like my house clean. I like the example. Sir, someone stole a television monitor once. Okay, one time they shoved a towel. Still don't know. No one's admitted to these things. Yeah. Into the toilet and then closed the toilet seat. I think they were probably high and thought it was hilarious, you know. And then one time I just am sitting on the couch and I hear water running. I'm like, this is weird. I'm here by myself. Like, what the fuck? And I go to the bathroom, and they just left the faucet on full blast. And I call the dude. I'm like, dude, why would you leave the water running? He goes, I'm sorry, I was in a rush. Like, how much time did you save by leaving the faucet on?
Millisecond.
And that's what's going to make you late. Like, so crazy. But the day that I decided, okay, I can't do this anymore was I was on a date with this girl I was fucking crazy about. And the last show was supposed to be over at 8:30 or 9. So I'm coming home at 11 o'clock at night. And I walk into a room full of people. And I was like, what's going on? I go, we decided to do a bonus show. So first of all, ask me, you know, but then the girl thinks I'm bringing her in to be raped. You know, there's 9 guys in the apartment, you know. So that was the day I called Lewis the next day and said, we got to get this fucking out of my house. And I just made it my full-time job to find a place. And nobody thought we could find what we were looking for. Everyone's saying it, you know, doesn't exist, or you want to pay too little money, or blah, blah, blah. It's not going to happen. And also, we're a new company. We're only, at the time, we were less than like a year old. So we don't have the credit rating to acquire a good lease, you know.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You know, you need to. Usually, you have to. There's a formula that they use that let's say for residential, I forget what it is for commercial, but for residential, it's like 40 times. So you have to be making 40 times your rent. So if it's $1,000 a month, you have to be making $40,000 a year, or they won't rent you the apartment. It's a pretty in residential. That's pretty much a standard.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is in commercial, but there is some sort of like whatever you filed your taxes for. If that's not a certain factor to the rent, you're just not going to get it.
It'd
right?
be even worse for commercial.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. There's also longer leases and whatnot. Yeah. But I had about, I would say, realistically 10 or 11 different agents looking, and I was looking every day, and everyone was telling me it wouldn't happen. You're not going to find a place. a couple of agents completely lied to me. We had signed a lease. We paid for the plans to get designed by an architect, and we had put the deposits down and everything. And then my family happens to be in real estate. So just for my own peace of mind, I pulled what's called the CFO, Certificate of Occupancy, to just make sure that this is legal.
Yep.
And it was registered as a storage unit that people were not allowed to be there.
Wow.
So I called the landlord and I said, look, I'm fine with it being illegal, but we need to put an amendment to an addendum to the lease that says we both know it's illegal and we're both allowing this to happen. Because if not, I was going to put in all this money to make it nice and look pretty, and he could call the fucking building authority, get me kicked out, and then sign it, and he got he just got everything redone for nothing, And he wouldn't do that, so then we threatened to sue him, and he gave us our money back, and I started looking again. It was crazy. But then this place I found, it was $1,000 a month cheaper than that place, 3 blocks closer to my house. And all the guys that said I wouldn't find a place for that rent, once I took it, I took pictures of it and sent it to all of them with the rent I was paying and said I found it, just to be an asshole.
I mean, New York's not the cheapest place in the world as well.
Definitely not.
And Manhattan is...
Crazy.
So I know podcasting's massive in the States, but it's also one of those things that it's really hard to create money from.
Very hard to monetize.
So it just sounds like everything's sort of going against you.
For sure.
But you've been able to, I mean, you walk past on the street, you wouldn't
know. That was
know.
Part of the magic too. I was looking for something that felt like, I don't know if you know the term speakeasy, or you know what that is?
Yeah.
Which is like a hidden place because I didn't want something facing the street with a window, like you were like in a fishbowl.
Yeah.
Especially on my show, we do get decent guests. Like we got a couple, like 2 months ago, we had Ace Frehley here, and Ace Frehley facing the street with crazy Kiss fans. In an hour, there'd be 500 people outside looking in, and I didn't want that.
Yep.
And also people are going to feel more like they have to behave a certain way if there's cameras and if there's people in the street. So I love that it's hidden. Plus, because it's hidden, we're paying a lot less rent. No retail wants this because no one can see you. There's no signage. So we got lucky that I found this place that really, other than like an office space, and it's even weird for an office.
Yep.
It just, I don't know. Before us, there was another media company here. So I don't know what else. The girl next door is a photographer. Like, it's limited use of what this is going to be. So it worked out for us in our favor.
Podcasting's starting to get more popular in Australia. Obviously, we've got a small population in general. So
is there 9 people living there now?
Yeah, no, I think we may have just got to 10,
okay,
maybe.
Cool.
Yeah, but
it was 11, and then Steve Irwin died. It dropped down, right?
Yeah, those damn stingrays. But you can see where it's going. You can see that there's popularity there, and there's potential business opportunities. And so, at least from my point of view, and I've been doing podcasting not as long as you guys, but like for about 3.5 years.
That's good. So you were early to the game, especially for Australia.
Definitely. And I'm sort of looking at going, okay, so how can you make it a long-term thing? How can you turn it into something that's sustainable and viable instead of just this passion project, hobby sort of thing that sort of scratches a niche? And you sort of look at what you guys have done, and it's really interesting because there's probably opportunities in Australia to do something maybe on a smaller scale. Because you guys aren't huge, but you're still significant. You're doing really good things. And Lewis was just talking about how many subscribers and people that are tuning into the individual podcasts, and obviously collectively as a network, you've got that attention there. Yeah.
So it's funny because I came from radio. I did radio for most of my adult life, and I had a rock radio show that was on like somewhere between 80 and 90 stations at its prime. I like to say 100 because it sounds better, but somewhere between 80 and 90. And we weren't on in the big markets. Like New York City is the number 1 market in the country.
Is it tour bus?
Tour bus, yeah.
Yep.
And so we were on ancillary markets. Like, so instead of New York, we were on New Jersey.
Yep.
We could still be heard in New York, but we were on, it emanated from Jersey. Or instead of being on in Chicago, we were right outside of Chicago, So we had none of those main market stations. We were in the markets surrounding them. And when you collectively put in those 90 stations that were not the most desired station, but you sell them as a unit, I had 300,000 people listening to me every weekend, right? So then you can go to advertisers and say, nationwide, there's 300,000 people listening to the show, and you can start commanding a higher dollar value, as opposed to going to each station and saying, hey, there's 10,000 people that listen here. But when you add them all up, it's something. And so I had that idea way back when that we should do that model. I didn't even know what a podcast network was at the time, but let's get 4 or 5 like-kind shows that have 10,000 listeners each, and then we'll sell it as a brand. Because at the time, Lewis and I used to talk. Him and I would share ideas, and we were both at the time. I think we had like 5,000 or 3,000 listeners each. I was like, I can't believe somebody wouldn't spend money. So what I started doing was like going to local strip clubs or local like guitar centers and saying, hey, I'll mention you on the air. Here's our demographics. And I was getting $20 a spot or $30 a spot, but it was enough to cover my costs at the time. And I looked at it very differently. I used to get shit for this on the Reddits, the podcasting Reddits. Because now there's like 200,000 people in that Reddit. When I was there was 2,000. It had just like kind of became a thing. And I remember getting shit on because I asked, how are the best ways, or what are the best ways to monetize your podcast? And they're like, fuck you, monetize your podcast. You're supposed to want to do it for free. I'm like, I don't want to do it for free. I want to fucking make money at this. So we looked at everything very differently, trying to figure out how to make money at it. And the best part is the last 3 years in a row in America, the amount of money spent by advertisers to podcasting has year over year gone up over 200% each year.
Fuck.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's the next thing there is. What's going to happen, though, is at some point the government's going to step in and fuck up everything. But right now, there's no really governing. Like when I was on radio, there's a lot of FCC regulations, what you can say and not say. There's nothing now. You could say whatever you want. And that's the brilliance of podcasting.
Well, I've definitely seen some regulations coming in within sort of the podcast world as far as I think it might be more around data and things like that. So, but I think that sort of goes into another world altogether. But it's just one of those things where, you know, when you've got the United States, which is what, 12 people.
Yes.
So a couple of extras there. You only need a small percentage.
Right, you just need. There's 300 million people in America, right? So if you have a podcast, and it's funny, Lewis uses this analogy a lot. When he had 1,000 people listening every week, he said, if I showed up at a venue, and every time I showed up, 1,000 people showed up, you are the king of the universe. That's you know. But in the podcasting space, like, who gives a shit? But we looked at it as like, no, these people really care. And it's that I used this term I made up a couple years ago. Was on Fox News, and they were talking about the difference between a podcaster and a radio guy, because I was doing both. They had me on as like a panelist, and I say that radio is a passive listener. It's on in the car, it's on in the background. You don't really think about it. But a podcast, you've downloaded an app, you've searched the term, you subscribed or pushed play. You went 3 or 4 steps in to make that happen. You fucking care what's going on right now with that person. So it's like 1,000 podcast listeners is probably worth 100,000 radio listeners. And
like Lewis was getting into sales mode before, he was talking about just converting people. Your percentage of being able to convert podcast listeners is so much higher than radio,
for sure,
because there's the intention there. They're already there for a reason. So whatever you're about to say, or potentially give them an opportunity to upsell or whatever it might be, you're going to have such a better conversion rate.
We had an advertiser on recently, and they saw a 10 times conversion. For every $1, they got back 10. So now they're like, basically, hey, we just want to write you a check. You know, whatever, just tell us what to do. We've had a less success. It's still good, but our subscriber rate is at about 1%. And I would like to get that to I think we can go to 3 to 5. But we've had a lot of, because there is no script here. We're figuring it out as we go. And my closet is filled with thousands of dollars of failed experiments because we didn't know how to make things work. So we try things. And, the fans that are still subscribed, that have put up with all this shit, I'm amazed. Like, I'm so thrilled about those people. But I think that we are probably a couple of months away from having all of these problems, at least for the most part, ironed out. And then I think once I can start saying to people, look, I bet you can have a pleasurable experience doing the premium membership with the RSS feeds and with the stream and the HD, all that shit working, and we're going to just start marketing specifically to anyone that is unsubscribed in the past 2 years. I think we'll bump that up to 3 or 4% pretty quickly.
You'd have to go through all that shit first in order to be able to work it out anyway.
Yeah, you want problems. You really do. You want fucking problems. If you don't have problems, you are not pushing the envelope forward. That's all it is.
Or you haven't seen the problem that's right in front of you.
Yeah. Like that too. Yeah. And it's just that I am not happy unless we're pushing forward. And we have weekly meetings every Monday, and I tell the producers, if you're content with your show, then you're not a good producer. You should be always looking like, what can I do to take this to the next level? What can I do to make it funnier or sound better or look better? What can I do to engage more audience? There's always going to be something.
Yep.
Unless you're fucking Joe Rogan, who also he still goes out, like he put out the tweets about maybe getting Kanye West, because he knew that would go viral. He's only doing that to engage his fans and get more interest. There's no other reason to do that.
Yeah.
So even at that level, the number one guy in the universe is doing the same thing we're all doing.
And the good thing about podcasts is and he's probably a good example. He's the example when everybody talks about podcasting anyway. But if you listen to him, he sort of craps on about all the things that go wrong on their podcast.
Yeah.
And he always says, I've got no idea. I've got no idea what I'm doing.
Right.
And it's just, as it works, then we sort of lock it in and we just keep going.
We just had one of our shows, Tim Dillon, was on Joe Rogan last week, and I heard the beginning. He was like, I don't think it's starting. Oh, is it starting? What? Is it starting?
Yeah.
I guess it's starting. I'm like, well, that's great. That to know that at that level, one of my favorite things that happened was that these, there's no video here, but you're in the GaS Digital Studio. These little boxes that are right in front of us for the audio listener. You can plug in your headphones. There's a cough button. I'm going to use it right now. Hey. Right? And there's HDMI to plug in a computer, charge your phone, and then volume, and it has our logo on it, right?
Perfect.
We put up a video of this online, and his producer, Joe Rogan's producer, reached out to us and said, where the fuck did you get those things? And then I sent them a link, and they had them made for their table.
Nice.
So to me, that's like, wow, we really did something here.
It just goes to show how much ground still needs to be covered.
For sure.
Everybody's working. Even the top of the pecking order still is trying to work it out.
Yeah, it's because it's such a new. It's 15 years old.
Yeah.
Compared to TV, which is 50 years old, and radio, which is 100 years old, whatever it is. I mean, we are so new here that everyone's still just trying to figure it out.
That's probably why podcasting is popular, anyways, because there's that genuine aspect where it's not the slick radio disc jockey sort of thing where it's like everything's way too polished and segmented. Podcasting is just this train wreck.
Yeah.
And people can relate to it more because you're listening to a couple of people or multiple people all just having a conversation, seeing where it goes.
I had a freak out on my show not that long ago. We had a comedian, Nick DiPaolo, on, who I'm really a big fan of. And I had been working so hard to set up every person's show. It was like one of the first weeks we were here. And I was like, all right, so now today's because I was still doing my show at home while I was helping everyone else get set up, And then it was the first time to do my show, and they just fucked up one thing after the other, and I lost it. And I'm like, you motherfuckers, I made sure every other goddamn show, and in front of, this is live, Nick's never done the show before, and he's looking like, what the fuck is going on here? But that's a thing that people love seeing shit like that.
That's it. I mean, that's what keeps people subscribed or tuning in each and every week, because just don't know what they're going to get. Yeah,
if it's perfect, polished thing every time, then listen to radio, because that's what you get.
And that goes back to that passive thing.
Yeah, exactly. Well. Then it becomes less engaging.
You've had your foot into the rock world a fair bit over the years.
Basically since I'm 18.
So has that helped with the podcasting as far as that network of people and sort of blending in those worlds together? Because, I mean, I think music's been little bit slow.
Especially rock music, yeah.
Oh, big time. On the uptake when it comes to podcasting. But obviously, you've been able to sort of blend the worlds together and have some successful podcasts off the back of it.
I think that it's from the negative. I'm, wheelhouse is, even though I'm always looking for new bands, I'm a big fan of trying to find what's the new band that's going to excite me. You know, my wheelhouse is that 80s and early 90s rock. That's where that was my radio show, whatever. So unfortunately, I feel most of my fans from that era of Tour Bus don't even know what the fuck a podcast is. You know, they couldn't care less. In the beginning, when we first started the show, I was doing both for a while, and I would promote my podcast on my radio show. And I would see some reviews of people saying, oh, cool, I listened to Tour Bus, now I'm listening to the SDR show. But it was an infinitesimal amount, just because I think most people do not know. Where it did help is in the first year of GaS, were basically just all people that I knew from radio.
Makes it easier.
Yeah, and what I would do a lot is like, okay, so come do the Tour Bus, because that's the thing they wanted to do. And then while you're here, hang out, we'll do another interview from my podcast. And very often be like, well, what the fuck is a podcast? It's like 5 years ago. I was like, no, just come, it'll be fun. You know,
While you're here,
whatever. I knew the guys, so it was easy. And it was also made it, you know, before podcasting became a thing, like the reason why it's called the SDR show and not the SDR podcast was because when I was naming it, I'm like, I'm embarrassed to call it a podcast. 5 years ago, it was embarrassing. Now you hear podcasts, people are like, oh.
Yeah.
If I tell someone I'm in radio, they're like, what? You know, you mean like, you know, Sirius XM? Or I'm like, no, like terrestrial radio. People are like, you still, who does that?
Yeah.
But now when you say podcast, like, oh, cool, podcast. That's awesome. Like everyone knows what that is now. 5 years ago, they did not. So it's nice to see that integration to where now most, like my mom listens to podcasts, you know?
I think it's sort of like that Facebook thing when your parents or grandparents started to create accounts and you went, oh fuck, here we go.
Yeah, exactly.
Things are changing.
Like, I mean, the number one shows on podcasting are NPR shows.
Yeah.
You know, and that's mainly skewing older. So it shows you the pervasiveness of podcasts.
One thing that I struggled with when I started this podcast, because I play in a band, and so for me, there was a little bit of this strategic cross-promotion sort of opportunity. I thought, I like the idea of doing a podcast and I can just talk shit and see where it goes, but it can be like this indirect, soft way of promoting the band in the background.
Right.
So they go, oh, I like that guy. What else does he do?
That's what every comic on the network does.
But in my head, I thought, well, we do all right as a band. We've got a good fan base. We're that band that's heavily influenced by 80s metal. So we're very so much Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, Queensryche, all that sort of stuff. And that's our demographic. And so when I launched this podcast and started to get a few weeks into it, then I'm expecting the numbers who are fans of the band
to come over.
Straight over. No
yeah,
way.
Same thing.
No way. And I thought, okay, well, it's probably just me.
Yeah.
But you kind of think you have to convince people. And I think just overly stereotyping here, but our key demographic were those 80s rockers, those 80s metalheads.
They don't know from a podcast.
And so it's commercial radio and, you know, or their CDs or their vinyl. They're still complaining about CDs.
Right. They can't get their bonus tracks anymore. But you know what's funny is that a friend of mine got a write-up in a really respected magazine. I forget which magazine it is, but let's just say it was Esquire. Like I forget what it was, about his podcast. And I was like, holy shit, dude, how did that do? He goes, it made no difference. I don't know why. I'm like, oh, because if you're still reading a newspaper, you're not listening to podcasts, so it makes no fucking difference. And that's exactly what he saw, no difference in it whatsoever. It's like we had the Jersey Shore cast on. And I'm like, oh my God, Jersey Shore, #1 fucking show on MTV. This is going to blow the fuck up. But I was like, oh, if you're still watching network television, you're not listening to podcasts.
Yeah.
And that's what it is, you know. But speaking of metal guys, on my show this Wednesday, we have the three Tremors.
Oh, yeah.
You know, which is Ripper, the guy from Jag Panzer, and I forgot who the third guy is, but
I can't remember. Yeah,
they're coming in to do the show. And even though I'm a fan, I feel that most people don't know who the fuck those guys are. You know, they know Rob Halford. They don't know that a couple of albums with this dude, Rip Rose, loosely based the Rockstar movie soundtrack, whatever. But so we're doing these things. I was trying to come up with like unique things. So we're doing something called Metalize My Childhood. And we have all these karaoke versions of television theme songs from when I was a kid, like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and the Golden Girls and whatever.
I saw your Instagram post with the
with the Fresh Prince. Yeah. And so they're all going to come in and do metal versions of those songs.
Oh, man, that's cool.
And it should be fun.
Well, in SDR, one of the really cool things, and I think it works, doesn't work for everybody, but you got those running questions in each episode.
Yeah.
So your firsts, and I think that sort of helps a lot because, especially for musicians, I mean, for my podcast, I just find anyone that I find interesting, like I'll just get them on. Most of the time, I've got no clue about the field of work or the industry or whatever it is, I ask a bunch of fucking dumb questions and I embarrass myself, but I kind of think that I'm the champion leading the flag in for everybody else.
For morons across the world?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, bring them all together. But I've steered a little bit away from being on the media lists for, tours and artists and new albums and all that sort of stuff, because you're on that media list where they've got 20, 30, 100 people all asking the same questions.
Right.
And if you're that last person, you're fucked. You've got no chance whatsoever. And so with musicians, I think a lot of musicians are still trying to get their head around what podcasts are, because they're expecting to walk in and say, well, how's the new album? Or how's the tour? Like, how's this album compared to the last album? Blah, blah, blah.
The same generic stupid questions, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And so they come in sort of just not engaged. They're sort of just going through the motions and not taking it seriously. And I think that's when you have to be really creative, as you just use that example of how do you sort of snap people into it and really get them in the moment.
It's funny is that was what you just described, that media list, is when I started realizing how unimportant radio is. So one of the things I used to host is this thing called the M3 Rock Festival, which is in Maryland, not that far from here. And I did it for like 5 years. And then behind the stage, anyone that's ever done media behind the stage in the backstage area, there's like this radio row, like radio tent, and it would be like 5 or 6 or 7 different radio stations or media outlets, from the most important to the least important, closest to the stage, obviously the most important, because how far down are they going to go?
That's right.
The more popular they are, maybe the first
exhausted.
2, right? But the younger bands will go all the way to the end, but you're lucky if they still are there by number 3. And for years it was whatever the local radio station was, and then it was my show, because we were on 85, 90 stations. And then over the years, I remember we went down to the 3rd, and then the 4th, and then the year that we were the last, and then the others were all podcasts. I was like, okay, maybe I should start looking into what this is exactly. And when I started realizing. And then also, I always was well aware of bands being asked the same fucking questions. My opening question always to bands, to just, when I was doing radio, to jolt them into what's going on here was, okay, here's the first question. I'm sure you've heard this a million times. Which one of you guys has the biggest dick? And then they're like, what? Like, all of a sudden, very confused.
Where am I?
Yeah, like, what's going on here? And it would always bring them into, like, paying attention to whatever was going to happen.
Yeah, I think that's certainly been on the receiving end when you're putting an album out and you get the list of email interviews, or you do the phoners and whatever, and it's the same sort of people asking those same questions over and over again. And you can feel it yourself where you don't even know who you're talking to.
Right, exactly.
And as a listener or a reader or a fan or whatever, and you're listening in, you go, well, there's nothing here for me whatsoever.
What's the point?
What's the point of tuning in?
For me with radio, though, the only problem was that at the time, because this is when radio got really fucking corporate and strict, it's like, we had 3 minutes to talk to a band, right? So if our regular mic breaks had to be about a minute, and then our interview breaks were 3 minutes. We could do 2, and there was 3 minutes before the new song. You'd come out of a classic song, 3 minutes into the new song, and then 3 minutes and say, all right, thanks, and that's it, right? Even if you taped a 40-minute interview, that was it. You're those airs. So you had, if you didn't put in the information about the new record and the new tour, then the publicist would be pissed, the management would be pissed, and you wouldn't get that next interview. So you were kind of like chained to at least 80% of that interview was already filled in with the details that you had to interject, and you're lucky if you got 20% of fun in there.
Well, I think that's a good thing about podcasting, is that you don't even have to do the plugs. You don't have to do the hard plugs.
Right,
you can,
exactly.
and whatever, but it's more organic, and it's sort of after the fact. Someone enjoys a conversation where it just fucking goes off on a million different tangents.
Yeah, for sure.
And then they go, I like that guy. What's he do?
Yeah, exactly. It's important. It's important too, and it took me a while, especially when I was doing both, to have that one break, one thought radio mentality versus that, okay, even now I struggle with it sometimes, where Jay will want to go on a tangent, my co-host, of like funny, and my head is always, because I did it for 18 years, oh no, we got to bring this back to the topic, which sometimes you have to, but now I try, and sometimes I fail, but I try to just let the funny happen, because we don't have 3 minutes, we have an hour. And if we had an hour, for the first year and a half, I stopped the show at an hour, exactly an hour, because that's how my mind worked. But now we go an hour 5, we go 45, we go an hour and 20. I don't care as much. I just try to keep it as close to an hour as possible. It's also more for, I feel bad for the producers and I feel bad for the staff. I don't want them to have to wait till midnight to go home. You know?
Yeah, and I think that's been a really good thing for me learning as I go, because I've never had that background in radio. A little bit just sort of music, and I guess there's little aspects that sort of translate over, but for the most part, you sort of just, you talk and talk and talk and talk,
Right.
and then you're like, oh fuck, we're at an hour and a half, and okay, so let's awkwardly try and wrap this up. But over time, you start to find that momentum and that groove along the way where you can start to sort of really sort of edge in what 45 minutes or an hour
Right,
is.
sounds
or
like
whatever
it.
it
And
is.
even now, like I have an app on my phone that lists, like I keep a track of whatever's going on. Like, oh, these are the 10 stories that I know I want to bring up this week. And in my mind, I mentally say to myself, oh, that's going to be 5 minutes, that's going to be 3, that's going to be 10. So I know where I'm at. I'm at 35 minutes, and then we'll just fill the rest with whatever. So I have an internal clock very easily when I know how we're going to be to an hour. And I do it I also can tell you from years of doing 1 minute of radio, that it's funny. I was on a, like one of these talking head countdown music shows once, like the top 50 worst rock ballads of all time. Because I was a VJ on VH1 for a little while. And whenever I did it, I would talk in 1 minute encapsulated thoughts. And they were always like, wait, we don't have to edit you. Like, why? What are you doing? It's perfect. We don't have to cut you. And I'm like, yeah, because I'm not allowed to talk more than a minute. So I know. And they loved me. They had me on like 5 of them because it was so easy to edit me. But then again, when we go to podcasting, I had to allow myself, like now, just fucking extrapolating like crazy because you can fill an hour.
That's right. Did you ever, when you've got that internal clock in your head, if you've ever had that train wreck conversation with, especially in podcasting, because you really are thinking in the moment and you're sort of working your way through things, and you might have little like topics that you want to cover, but if you've got what's the nice way of putting it? Just a shit guest,
Right?
Who answers with a yes or a no,
which just happens to everybody, you know. Thankfully, which I hate to say this, and I apologize to any porn stars that are listening, but
massive porn star listenership.
We have a big porn star relationship because we've had so many porn stars on. They all listen. I get emails from porn stars a lot, but most of them are terrible. Right? They're just not funny. They don't have to be funny, but they're not engaged. They don't have great conversational skills. So in the beginning, Jay and I would try and like dig out stories and try and more than, okay, yes, and kind of, you know? But then at one point, I remember we just had this like look at each other and we started laughing. And one day we just decided, oh, we're just going to talk to each other. So nowadays, that's kind of what happens. Like if I can tell something's going south, Jay and I will have like a good enough chemistry where we'll just start talking to each other more, and we could fill 12 hours together. So it's never a problem.
And if you're in the midst of a conversation with that guest and you can see it happening in real time, at least then you can have that conversation. And if that third person feels like dropping into the conversation, then fantastic.
Yeah, exactly.
But otherwise, you can just sit there and just watch.
It's definitely funny because you never know who's going to gel with you or not. Sometimes I've thought coming into a show, this is going to be the worst show ever, and it ends up being hilarious or just so much fun. And some guests that I'm super excited about are not great for whatever reason. And it could just be you're having a bad day, they're having a bad day. I've come to realize for myself that I, more than Jay, I feel, dictate the positive or negative energy in the studio. So I've been really self-aware over the past few months to try and come in a much better attitude, because it's generally, you know, we film live at 9 at night and we try to always do it live, and I'm here sometimes 6 in the morning.
Yeah.
So by the time I'm finally ready to do my show, I just want it to be fucking over. So I've now I now try to make a conscious effort every day around, every Wednesday around 6 o'clock. I go home, try and sleep for an hour, shower, and come back with a renewed energy, because I know when I'm in a shitty mood, I'm going to bring everybody down.
Well, especially if it's video as well, because you've got a viewership.
Yeah.
Who are tuning in, and as you said, your mood sort of dictates everything.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of sort of unmeasurable stuff that you can't actually pinpoint, but it does come down to how you hold yourself and body language and stuff like that. So if you're slightly off. Exactly.
It's actually happened recently. I forgot what guest was, but I was like 5 to 7 minutes into the show, and I'm like, all right, I can tell I'm fucking being a piece of shit right now. So I just kind of like had a readjustment, and then immediately just everything started getting better, you know? And it's hard because I am a host here, but more importantly, this is, you know, my life savings is in this place, and I am here fucking every day. I answer every support email. I'm the one answering the phones. I do so much. It's crazy how much time and effort. I've look at pictures of myself from 2 years ago. I look 15 years younger 2 years ago because I don't sleep anymore. I just never content here and feel that we could always be getting better and doing things better. And every problem resides on me because really, which shocks the shit out of me that I'm almost 50. The whole staff is 30 for the most part, right? Why do I know more about computers than all of you? You all grew up with computers. You should be teaching me.
That's right. Should be schooling you.
It's never happened yet. I'm explaining everything to everybody. I'm the one that's always bringing in the new tool that we can try and make everything better. And it's not happened yet once where someone comes to me and it's like, we should be using this, or that we've been doing this way. This way is so much better. And I'm dying. I cannot wait for that day to happen. Hopefully.
Well, there's the call to action.
Yeah, there's a call. I don't know if it will. I mean, in fact, it's funny. It's also because most of the people here smoke pot every day, and they just, we brought in a certain type of audience. I mean, of employee are all fans of the network. So generally, they're all drug addicts, for the lack of better words.
Do you feel that the pressure that you put on yourself is healthy pressure?
I think so. I don't think we would be anywhere. Look, Lewis and I have an amazing chemistry because what he's good at, I fucking hate doing, and what I'm good at, he hates doing.
Yeah.
So it's symbiotic in a lot of ways. I don't think we'd be anywhere near this if it wasn't for my OCD lunacy.
Yeah.
The story that quantifies it is that I built our first studio. I built the computer. I did all the wiring. I did everything. Right. I didn't know. I'd never built a computer before. But the school of Google and YouTube, you fucking figure it out. And they told me at the time, you're not going to build a multicam HD switching studio for less than 50 grand. At the time, it was like, 5 years ago, 4 years ago now, because it was just SDR at the time. And I was like, no, there's a fucking way to do it. There's no, you're just looking at it from a fucking radio school, television studio. There's ways to do this now. And I found this, the thing is called, a Black Magic or a TriCaster. There's a few of these companies, yep. And they start at like $7 grand for the shit one, and they go up to 50 to buy a good one that can do 5 cameras, or whatever. I found online some weird Chinese company that it's a card that you plug into the computer that does the same thing. It came with only Chinese instructions, and I used Google Translate. And I was figuring it out a little bit at a time, and the thing cost $800, and it worked perfectly. Once I was done crying for 4 days trying to figure it out.
Painful.
Yeah, it was really painful. And then their customer support was hilariously bad English because it was translated from Chinese, and it took a couple of weeks to get it to work. But when I finally got it working with the right drivers and right, compressions and all that other shit, I was like, oh my God! So I just saved us at least $6,000, if not more. And then, and it just put that towards the cameras, put that towards something else. So we were able to build that first studio for like $8,000, which is crazy.
It's insane. Yeah. I mean, it's, as I was saying before, like, you look in Australia with podcasting, and like, I look at this and you think, how can you do something similar? And I think even you guys, just looking at the model that you guys have created, I think there's still an element of uniqueness that you guys do versus what a lot of other people out there are doing.
A lot of them are copying now, which is funny. Like, no one was doing the premium content versus, like, it was either all premium or all free. No one at the time was doing what we were doing, which we still do, which is, delayed to the release to the free side and stuff like that. And I see a lot of people mimicking that now, which is fine. I mean, when we started, Patreon wasn't a thing, so we just kind of created our own version of that, so to speak, to support. I still think there's plenty of places where we can get better at everything that we're doing. We're creating a new app because our app sucks, and boy, as I said, we made a lot of mistakes, but the interesting thing is, even where, like, say in Australia, we're at the birth of this, even 10, 15 years in. Most podcasts, by all accounts right now on iTunes, they say there's 1 million podcasts. That's what we're closing in on 1 million. And 90% of them, so 900,000, have less than 200 listeners per episode. So now we just got rid of 900,000. There's 100,000 podcasts left. Of those 100,000, if you have more than 5,000 listeners, now you're in the top 5% of podcasts. So that is only now 5,000 podcasts on the planet that have more than 5,000 listeners, which is crazy. But then to get into the top 2%, the Joe Rogans, the Mark Marons, This American Life, that's like that's when you get into the 100,000 or over. There's even fewer. Maybe there's a few dozen or maybe a couple hundred. But it just shows you, there's no barrier to entry. Anybody can start a podcast, which is a beautiful thing, but also a bad thing because anybody can start a podcast. But when you get to that upper echelon, you are in such an elite group that you really, the world is your fucking oyster at that point. It's crazy because so few people figured out that formula to get that far.
Well, and I certainly noticed it because I use the Apple podcast app, and so I'm thinking of a topic, and the same thing with Google and YouTube. Like I use Apple Podcasts as YouTube or Google as far as me wanting to find out information or learn something. So
sure.
I type a topic in, and I'll find podcasts, but the amount of shows and episodes that are
on that topic.
Well, on that topic, but it's.
Is it how to get away with pedophilia? Is that what you're searching the most?
You tapped in. You tapped in. But like a lot of them are out of date now. Like they're already 3-4 years old. And you look at the show and go, oh, well, maybe there's a more recent episode. No.
Yeah, well, people abandon this,
yeah.
When they realize that nobody listened, they're like, fuck this.
Yeah.
What's funny is there's a company, the biggest podcast network that I know is called Podcast One.
Yep.
And part of their MO is just to throw money at celebrities to do podcasts. And their podcast graveyard is hilarious because they do it for a few episodes. Either they hate it or there's no listeners or they can't commit to once a week. But there's so many abandoned shows. Like Snooki did like 8 episodes, and Rick from Pawn Stars, which is he did like 9 episodes. It's just funny to see that graveyard of episodes that are there.
Well, and especially from a mindset point of view, when I started, you look around and there's a few other people doing it, in Australia. They were doing similar sort of stuff to me, and you're like, oh, there's a bit of competition there. So you start to you're a bit self-conscious and you're trying to get a little bit better than them and whatever it is. But then like on social media, they're getting a little bit more attention than you are, etc. And over time, then you realize, oh, fuck, that person hasn't put out an episode in 6 months.
Yeah.
Wow. And so then suddenly that group just keeps going down and down. And at the moment, I mean, there's still some really good episodes and shows out there, but there's hardly any.
In Australia.
Yeah, because a lot of them are sort of not. It's so funny because it's a musician thing as well. As far as commitment to the long term, we're sort of looking for that short term thing.
Right. Everybody wants that. I equate it to radio, where that first time you talk on the microphone, I remember thinking, oh, the world heard me, and I'm going to have so many new emails and so many new fans. But no, it's just not the fucking case. And it takes a long. And to me, I noticed with SDR, it wasn't until the 3rd year that I started realizing, oh, people are actually listening. When I first came in here, the Con Ed guy recognized me. I was like, whoa, really? That's cool. And those when I was in LA last year, I got it. I actually thought it was a joke. I got into the cab or the Uber. Sorry, it was an Uber, and he was listening to the SDR show, and I was like, "What's going on? What's going on here?" He's like, he had no idea who I was.
It's like, where's the hidden camera?
Yeah, it was really weird. That was really fucking cool. Those kind of little things. Then, a few of my brother's ex-girlfriends listened to my things like that. When I was like, oh, okay, people are listening, but because you get emails, you get tweets, but I'm not a super social media guy, so I don't really have that direct interaction. But I just focus on trying to make the show as good as it can be, and that to me, leaving a good episode when you walk out of the studio, whether it was radio, whether I used to be a nightclub DJ and a radio, any one of those things, when you finish and you feel like you did a good job, and I'm sure same thing as a band. Nothing is better than that feeling where you just know you did good. That's a great feeling.
Do you think that the video element with GaS has helped?
I think what it is for me is that it is on the forefront because nobody's doing that. I mean, not nobody, obviously, but a very small amount. Yeah. So to be able to have that element, look, I think it's 95% of our audience is audio only. So the fact that it's bandwidth issues for people that don't want to eat up their bandwidth, whatever. I think just like with a lot of things we're doing, I've always just been trying to think of 2 steps next. We were the first network to have an Alexa skill. I think we still may be one of the only.
Yeah, I think you would.
And I just figured out how to get it done and wanted to have it just to say that we have it. I was trying to put which I never finished it, but And it's funny because I still think it's a great idea, but I couldn't get everyone to fucking support me. You know, Bitmoji? You know those little...
Yeah.
I had GaSmoji.
Oh.
And I wanted to put out the keyboard and it had little caricatures of each of us with expressions that we normally say on our shows. And I couldn't get everyone on board for it. I was like, all right, fuck this then. I'm not doing it, but I still think it's a good idea.
Watch when it explodes later on.
Yeah.
You're like, guys,
yeah, exactly. Well, it's what's her name? Kim Kardashian now.
Yep.
She has Kimojis that made her millions. You know, so I'm not saying we'd make millions, but I still think like, what's the fucking next thing? Like I spent a week. I never got out really working 100%. And again, nobody wanted to use it, so I stopped. But I was getting a telestrator to work, which is those. If you ever watch football games, when they draw on the screen, and you go like, I went here, then we went there, and they circle that. There's a couple of shows here that dissect videos. That's what they do. So I'm like, this is fucking perfect for them, but nobody cared. And I'm the only one that cared. I spent all this time and effort. I'm like, all right, fine, fuck it. I'm not going to do it. Look at something else. So we have this new thing now that's on the desk. It's called the Stream Deck. And it's a little like keyboard USB that triggers, like you could trigger sound effects or trigger transitions or things like that. And it's just a cool little thing to make their live production easier. And it seems like they're embracing that one. So I'm 1 for 3 right now.
Well, I think with the way that bandwidth, I mean, you spoke about bandwidth before, it's getting easier and easier. Everyone's got like Netflix streaming services now.
Exactly.
People aren't watching normal TV anymore.
True.
So, and I certainly am majority audio, but then I started to watch the odd YouTube stream or whatever it is and go, oh wow, there's something different about this. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And it's sort of almost years and years ago, there was such a heavy importance put on video, and then audio became this massive thing, and everyone started neglecting video, and now we've started to come back a little bit.
Because the cost went down too. So what we used to do for a long time that I stopped doing, because they never really took off, 360 cameras, right? I put a 360 camera in position 4.
Yep.
So there was 3 of us on the show all the time for the most part, and we'd stream from that camera. So if you had a 360 viewer, it looked like you were sitting in the 4th chair with us. Yep. That was the idea. And I did that for like a year or 2, but it just never, no one ever really fucking cared about 360 cameras. So it was such a tremendous effort to get that up, and it's a big video. I tried. I'm just always trying something, so I gave up on that.
And this is going back into your closet of...
Yeah, it's in my closet. That's what it is. And I'm always... My new one is I want to get the green screens to work in here. It's a weird setup, but I'm trying to figure out... I remember looking at the time, green screens were so expensive to get a really nice... big green screen. So what I did was I bought a regular retractable blind, and then went out, spray painted it green outside, let it dry. It cost me $50 to get a green screen because it was
Did it work?
Yeah, it worked great. Yeah. But I now again everything in my, and it's still in my old studio in the studio house. But here I want everything is supposed to be like top of the line. I want people to always come in here and be like, whoa, like what the fuck is going on here? The amount of time I spend hiding wires, you don't see wires here, is crazy. Like if you look in there, I'm sorry, there is no video element to this show, but there's a little white box in the corner, and behind that is all the cabling. It's all mounted, but I hated that you could see it. So I built the box just to cover it. Even like all the wires go into the ceiling, and you don't even see, like they're seamless. You've
got some nice fairy lights here.
Yeah, well that's different. Those are to give an ambient glow. That's on purpose. But everything else, like even on the table, I hate that look. Like because every podcast studio ever was created as a podcast studio, and then they added video.
Yep.
We've done it with video in mind from the beginning. So that's why you don't see those wires. That's why we have these mic stands that come from the bottom up, where every other mic stand goes up and down, and it just blocks your face on camera.
Right. Yep.
And that was very purposeful with this.
So obviously you've got visions of where this is all going, because you're making decisions in advance or preempting where it's going to go. I mean, you've got 3 studios.
2 here and 1 in my house, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously you've only been here for a few months, but like, what's the future look like for this? What's the grand plan?
Well, a couple of things I'd like to see happen, and I send out this like email to my business partner and a few other people every once in a while of like my thought process of goals for the next 3 months, 6 months, etc. Right. The first thing I'd like us to do is I'd like to see us do one scripted show, like an actual criminal style, but not that obviously. Something where there's sound effects and it takes a few months to put together, and it's encapsulated season I think that's important. And I don't know if we can, but that would be great. That's number one. Number two, I do like the idea of a live call-in show. Lewis does it somewhat, but I haven't figured out the technology 100% yet, because those units, they're called, from radio, it's called a Comrex. They're like $5,000. And then your radio bill's like a few $1,000s a month. But there's, with VoIP these days, there's going to be a solution to have a 6-line. We have 6 lines, but we've not been able to get it to work right, where someone can moderate calls from outside. And just have to have a real call-intensive show would be another thing that I would like to see happen. What's crazy is that other businesses have spawned from GaS Digital, which is the merchandising business, which is now, it's called merchpump.com. Not only do we sell shirts for all the shows on the network, but we sell for about 10 shows that are not on our network, right? Then we started our advertising department, which we're splitting off into a second business. I mean, a third business, but I like the term pod fuel, because merch pump, pod fuel. Because you're fueling your podcast with ads is my theory.
Very good.
But we haven't, so if your listeners can steal it, because I haven't taken the name yet. But now we sell ads for about 10 or 15 shows that are not on our network, but we're making money for that. And then I started a website called nycpodcasting.com, where there is no branding for GaS Digital whatsoever. And we have a half a dozen people that are renting the studios that don't know shit about what goes on here, but it is a premium podcasting studio. So I'd like every one of those businesses to increase by at least 20% come end of summer. So the goal of having about 10 to 15 regular podcasts renting, to have another 30 or 40 shows that we're selling ads for, 30 or 40 shows that we're selling shirts for, and then to get GaS Digital's membership up to that 2 to 3%. I think those are all very attainable goals for the end of this year. And then the real dream is, look, I don't know how well versed you are with what's going on in the world of podcasting, but Gimlet Media, which is a very big podcast network, they were just bought by Spotify for $300 million. Yes, they're bigger than us, but they're not that much bigger than us, right? And then there's a company called Himalaya that they are a podcast platform in China worth $700 million. They just gave their New York or U.S. Counterpart $100 million in funding to become the next podcast network. So there's money now that podcasting is so much on the forefront. I feel that there is some sort of potential exit strategy. I would still want to keep my show. And it's funny, I tell all the hosts here, if you think you could come to work and smoke pot every day when somebody puts $50 million into this network, that is not going to fucking happen. So enjoy it while you can.
While it lasts.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's similar to the software developers, once that became the rage, then
everyone was looking for the next one.
That's it. And they're paying hundreds of millions of dollars for stuff that was worth nothing.
The day that those 2 stories came out back to back, 4 or 5 different people that I know that are in that VC venture capital world emailed me and said, "Tell me about GaS Digital again." And I was like, "Yeah, sure." They just made me laugh. I was like, "Okay," so that put the fire under my ass where we're putting our business plan together. I mean, this all just happened in the past couple of weeks, so I do see an exit strategy at some point in one way, shape, or form. In fact, there's a juice company here in New York called Juice Press, which there's 80 locations. It's worth like $80, $90 million, this company. And a friend of mine started that company, and he does a podcast here because he sold it, and he was given a non-compete, so he can't be in retail. So he just wanted to do something, and he asked me to co-host with him. So I do a podcast with him. It's called The Sherpa and the Schmuck. It's just like a food and health type show, which is relatively new, a few hundred listeners right now, But he is someone that is starting to introduce me to VC people because he knows them all because he made fucking millions of dollars. So we've had these weird meetings where people are coming in and talking about podcasting. And it's fascinating to me because the truth is, it only started a little over 2 years ago, and we don't know what the fuck we're doing. We're just kind of figuring it out as we go.
And a lot of those guys have got zero knowledge of what podcasting is, let alone like radio or anything like that. So when they walk into something like this, it has the perception, and you guys do compared to a lot of other people, but they've got their shit together.
Yeah.
And so wow, there's something legitimate that's happening here. Yeah. I can put some money.
And anybody that comes by they want to be a part of this. You know, it's like Dee Snider's on the network. How we signed him was he came to do, I mean, I've known him for years, but he came to do Jamie Josta's show. And he came in, I'm like, hey, dude, what's up, man? And he goes, oh, what? He goes, is yours? I said, yeah, it's mine. He's like, what the fuck is going on here? And I tell him, and I just said to him, dude, A, I want you to do a podcast here, and B, I already have the name. And he goes, what's the name? I said, I Want to Talk. And he goes, God damn it, I really like that name. And then now that's what it's called, and the show's on the network.
And I mean, that's popular.
It's doing well. Yeah,
away.
it's really doing well. I mean, it's Dee Snider, so it's not doing as great as I'd like it to be, but he took like 8 weeks off, I think, because he had a little bit of a, I think it was, I don't know if it was a health issue or what, but he had to stop recording for about 8 weeks. So we just ran he had a podcast years ago. So we ran some like vintage episodes just so that there's always new content. But he's great on air. I mean, he's so good at what he does. So I think that will be a big show eventually.
Do you think that there's opportunity to tap back into that rock world?
I think as podcasting is becoming more popular, I think I see it happening. You know, like I host this thing every year called Shiprocked, which is a big rock cruise. And the amount of people on that cruise that love my podcast tells me that it's moving that way. That now, we used to do it, we did the show live every night. On the shows, the cruise is usually five days. So the first 4 nights, the last day you get off the boat, we do it. The last thing that would happen every day was my SDR at midnight. Was the last thing. This year, Jay couldn't go, and the other comic I wanted to come on with me couldn't go. I was like, you know, let me just go as the host, and I don't need to necessarily do that, and I get to go to bed early instead. And the amount of people that were pissed off that it wasn't happening blew my mind. So I'm like, well, that's good to know. And just from the first year to this year, well, we're doing it now 4 years, the podcast, but the amount of people now that I see wearing SDR shirts on the boat and talking about past guests, I'm like, okay, this is moving into the rock space more and more.
I've got a lot of friends that are down at Monsters of Rock at the moment. And
you know, those bastards, I mean, they're nice guys, but they started as people that worked on Shiprocked.
And so they saw an idea.
Yeah, and they pitched it to the guy that runs Shiprocked and said, we should do an 80s cruise, an 80s rock cruise. Because Vince Neil from Motley Crue was originally called the Motley Cruise.
Right. Okay.
And then Nikki Sixx threatened to sue because of the name, so they changed it to Shiprocked, and he actually was the guest for the headliner for the first year. But then they started the Monsters of Rock. They left and started Monsters of Rock.
Well, I'm flicking through social media, and I'm seeing a lot of people down there, and you just think there's just so much. And like our band played at a festival in Atlanta called Prog Power, and I've been there a few times, and you just see how, what's the word, that rock community is so, I'm trying to think of a better word than ancestral, but it's so deep and connected, and there's that real sort of community vibe. And I think if you can penetrate that,
it's true.
Then you've got these it's just the same loyalty that you get with music.
Yeah, we had a non-point on SDR a couple weeks, like maybe 2 months ago, and we talked about what we call the Shiprock bump.
Yep.
Because once you get on Shiprocked as a band, those people come see, even the ones that weren't on the boat that year, but they know that you were a Shiprock band, they go see you wherever you are. That's cool. Because that's that deep-knitted community of rock and roll. And I think that, if you can be the podcast that relates to those people, that is a huge resource. And we try to do that. The problem with us is we're live Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. It's hard to get a rock band. If they're in New York on a Wednesday night, they're probably playing. Yeah. You know, so it's hard. We try to tape during the day sometimes. You know, this year we had Seven Dust. We had a non-point. We just had a new band called Royal Test that's pretty cool come in. But it's hard to get them. And it's hard to booking the guests on my show is my number one pain in the ass, to just try and get, because I don't want to be also there's comics that do the rounds. So if they've been on Legion, they've been on Tim Dillon, they've been on No Disrespect, all the shows on the network. Like, I don't want to just bring them on again. I want to be the show that finds other people.
It's a magnet for new people.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like we had Dane Cook on last week, who was huge. You know, he sold out. He's one of 10 comics that sell out Madison Square Garden. So I love that he came to New York and did one podcast, and it was mine.
That's cool.
So that's a good, feather in the cap for us.
That long fucking flight home to Sydney, I'm going to be scheming with my little notebook, because I've been saying it all the way through, so much opportunity, and to see this and to walk into it, it's pretty inspiring. It's cool.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you. And I say this to everyone, like, when I started in radio, no one fucking helped me with anything. I had to fight tooth and nail. And the same thing happened with podcasting. I had no one to help me. But I am an open book, and I tell people all the time, any questions you have, how do I do this? What were you using for this? What software for this? Just email me. I fucking answer. Anyone that's trying to do this, I welcome. I don't look at it as competition. I look at it, the more successful shows that are making a name for themselves in podcasting, the better it is for everybody.
It's a good place to wrap it up.
All right, cool.
Ralph, where can people find you?
Follow me everywhere at I am Ralph Sutton. And then, of course, the SDR show everywhere at the SDR show. But don't let your kids listen to that show because it's pretty awful. And then everywhere for the company at GaS Digital and then gasdigitalnetwork.com.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me, buddy.
Alrighty, folks. Now you better go and check out GaS Digital. You can go to gasdigitalnetwork.com. All their shows are over there. You can check it out. SDR Show, Legion of Skanks, Believe You Me, the Real Ass Podcast, I Want to Talk, The Justice Show, heaps of stuff, Irish Goodbye. It's all over there, gasdigitalnetwork.com. You can find most of these shows on your normal podcast player, but if you go to GaS Digital, you can become a subscriber. You get the entire back catalogue, all the archived episodes, you get exclusive content. There's heaps of stuff on there. There's a lot of great ideas. If you're a podcaster, just even for your own show, or you may want to, I guess, expand and create your own network, maybe. Lots of ideas, lots of great ideas if you go over there and have a bit of a sticky beak. So go and check that out, gasdigitalnetwork.com. You can go to iamralphsutton.com if you want to learn a bit more about Ralph, or search for I am Ralph Sutton on Twitter and Instagram. But I'll have everything in the show notes over at andysocial.net, or you can click through on your podcast player. There'll be a bunch of clickable links in there as well. So go and check all that out, support the guys. And obviously, thanks to Ralph for his hospitality and Lewis's hospitality. But a massive thanks once again to Bobby, their exec producer, who literally made this happen. Like, it literally wouldn't have happened without him. Thank you so much for booking everything in, booking everybody in, just making it super easy. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to catching up again in the near future. And I forgot to thank this person in the last episode, but thank you so much to Hank. Hank helped out with some of the producing on the day with all of the podcasts that I recorded at GaS Digital. So thank you so much, Hank. Really appreciate the assistance and calming my nerves and making it super easy. Hank's originally from Adelaide, so a fellow Aussie, and he's got his own podcast called the Kickin' It podcast, kickinit.libsyn.com. So you can go and have a search for Kickin' It in your podcast player. So go and check all that out. But thanks so much, folks. A lot of inspiring stuff to take away. I went home on the plane making a million notes and scheming for the upcoming months and years, and I've just got a lot of ideas and plans and stuff that I've already started to act on, which is really, really cool. So thank you guys. Really appreciate it. A few updates before we wrap it up. Anyone that's following the saga of our new album, well, let's just say that we're getting closer to announcing some details. Actually, by the time this episode comes out, we would have announced our Australian tour. So the Australian tour kicks off on the 21st of June, and I don't have the dates written in front of me, so I'm going to try and remember them. But go over to lord.net.au, or you can go to the Lord Facebook page, or Lord Instagram, or Lord Twitter, whatever it might be, and you should be able to find the tour dates over there. But the tour dates off the top of my head are the 21st of June at the Basement in Canberra, the 28th of June at the Back Room in Brisbane, the 29th of June at Badlands in Perth, the 5th of July at the Evelyn in Melbourne, the 6th of July at Jive in Adelaide, and, of course, the 26th of July, I believe, at Crowbar in Sydney. So just a really quick run around the country, hitting most of the capital cities. Yes, I've missed a couple, but it's just a great way to lead up to the upcoming release of the new album. So more details coming soon, but we figured we may as well announce something in the meantime while we wait for some of this release information to be confirmed. But we are getting closer, and you guys know the drill. We're excited to share this with you. And anybody that's listened to the previews, there's 20 plus preview tracks over at Bandcamp, so go and check it out if you haven't already. You'll have a taste of what this album's going to be all about. But this is, you know what they all say. It's our best work to date, blah, blah, blah. I honestly think this is our album that's going to define us as a band. A lot of people will argue that Set in Stone or even Ascendance were probably albums that sort of tick that box. But I think this album is going to be the album that people will think of us in years to come. This will define us as a band. So we're really excited to share this with you guys. And all I can say is just, keep listening to what's already out there, and just be patient. We're getting there slowly, but I'm looking forward to sharing a lot of cool stuff with you over the coming months, and also those shows. If the album's not ready by then, we might have something else in store. Just anyway, I'll leave it at that. Self-starter. Before I wrap it up, as I said at the beginning of the episode and the last couple of episodes, I'm looking for a couple of more guests before I wrap up the recording for season 2. As always, you book a bunch of people and then not everybody follows through and goes ahead with it. So shit happens sometimes. So I've got a couple of extra spots. If anybody out there knows somebody that runs their own business, has a cool little side hustle, a little way of earning a bit of extra coin, please let me know. I would love to consider you or someone you know for the podcast. And the podcast series will launch in the first week of June and will run until December. So really excited to share that second season with you once it gets up and running. Anyway, that's enough. More episodes coming over the coming weeks. I've been recording heaps, a bit of a backlog happening now, so I need to sort of just keep managing that. But until next week, folks, take care, keep sharing around. I love you. Bye.